Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara. Episode 59. Shri Mahaswami, the sage with eyes of light. The diary of a seeker of truth, Dr.Serge Demetrian. Dear devotees, now we shall listen to the second part, fourth section of this divine book under the subtitle At the Shivasthana Ashram. He then entered his room, making me believe that I had to leave, only for him to immediately come back. He stood at the window door from 30 to 40 seconds. This time he did not allow me to see his eyes, but only his hands, as he had passed them through the iron bars. And, surprisingly, he slipped in between, in an unusual movement, half of the left leg. I hurried to direct my look on the foot of rosy mother of pearl, the divine image of the Guru. Through his blessing, I felt totally detached from the body. I was thinking, what to do now? Shall I remain glued to his foot like a grain of sand? Or hang on to his clothes as a speck of the earthen ochre dust which colors them in faint orange? Or shall I change into a petal and remain among the flower garlands he often wears around his neck? This transcendental condition of being neither in the physical nor the dream world continued for a few minutes. After careful consideration, in order to purify myself, I decided to bathe in the water of his kamandalu. No sooner said than done. Once everything was well cleaned, the idea came to me that I could meditate on the sun as being Brahman. Immediately I entered the sun, although it had withdrawn behind the horizon. For this, I had simply utilized the password of a few holy names I knew from the verses dedicated to the Master of the Day. The body, my old body, stood back, totally void internally. Sri Mahaswami entered it so that it did not become a tempting prey for some audacious being. Never before had I been so sure that he had entered my frame. He took in his charge all the organs: brain, pelvis area, vertebral column, heart, abdomen, limbs. My ancient body was entirely changed into this very fine substance out of which his body was made. I wore a beard and mustache. His very own orange cloth, the danda, and the kamandalu. It was very clear that there existed the same Sri Mahaswami in two seemingly separate appearances. As regards me, no doubt the subtle me, I was perched as an onlooker in the sun, where I clung on, somewhat unsteady but determined. The solar password kept me there. At a certain moment, I had to leave the sun as the solar mantra had vanished. I descended from the sun in front of the Shivasthana hut, but my ancient body was fully occupied by Sri Mahaswami, so I could not enter into it. The only solution was to return to the sun. There were 2 or 3 such comings and goings. Really, it was better in the sun. I had no care or conscience of the body or the mind. It was neither hot nor cold, but only a feeling of well-being. Then, slowly, Sri Mahaswami withdrew from my old body, which he had occupied as a measure of safety. His legs, then the hands, one after another, his trunk, and finally his head. As for me, I had to reintegrate into the ancient frame which Sri Mahaswami had left empty. Brr, a structure made out of cold ashes. If someone wanted to strike it with a mere flick of a finger, it would have fallen like a handful of dust. I do not know how it was still able to move. Actually, all the objects around were also made up out of the same dust, though slightly more hardened. I left the ashram with movements akin to an automaton. I could, however, repeat the divine names and great words that came spontaneously by themselves. On the way, I stood for a while in front of the Varadaraja Perumal temple, then headed for Shivakanchi. It was there only that the feeling of wearing a cold, ashen body vanished. Kanchipuram, Friday, 10th February 1972. Solar Darshan 2. The morning was good. However, I did not feel that I had permission to go to the temple of the Queen as I would have liked. In the afternoon, I reached Shivasthana somewhat late in the day. Shri Mahaswami was behind the bars of his voluntary prison, that is, at the window door on the western side. One could say he was waiting for me. I contemplated him for a few minutes until I felt swept away by a luminous current. It was only then he stood up. He was almost undressed, briefly covered by his ochre cloth. With a fleeting glance at me, he retired into his room. I think he had already finished his evening ablutions. I felt immediately that I had to stay near his room and meditate. In order to encourage me and prevent me from leaving or engaging in some idle mental talk, he coughed twice or thrice, although he was not ill. I had not heard him cough previously, neither yesterday nor today. I caught the signal and tried to separate myself from the body, like yesterday. I succeeded, but to a lesser degree. It was possible to retire for a few seconds into the sun, flying like a rocket propelled by the solar words. Behind me, Sri Mahaswami had taken in charge my body, but in a less complete manner than had happened yesterday. After this, the need of some movement was necessary. I left for a short walk across the fields. When I came back, as soon as I reached the western window door, Sri Mahaswami appeared behind the bars and sat on his stool. I performed a long prostration without witnesses. I stood alone in front of him for 20 to 30 minutes. This time it had not been possible to see his eyes as he concealed them, looking but only fleetingly at me. Then one of the great words of non-duality appeared by itself with force and completely wiped out my head and body. Sri Mahaswami entered one by one all the 5 plus 1 sense organs, then the 5 action organs. Next in turn came the brain, the spinal cord, the spinal nerves, the sympathetic nervous chains, and the heart. I was he, only himself. His wrinkles, his beard were on my face. I had in the nostrils the characteristic odor of his cloth. My flesh possessed the indefinable consistency of his body. The bones had become flutes of transparent crystal. His entry into what I had been seemed to be permanent. Sri Mahaswami had reached up to the cavities in the middle of the brain and to the tenuous channel that lay in the center of the spinal cord and also the epiphysis and hypophysis. When the body came to be completely replaced by him, there was an internal sound that rang with Swamiji's name. Concentric waves radiated from the site where the heart had previously been located. An extraordinary feeling of peace and stability invaded all that had been this I. Then the body was ordered to open the physical eyes. At that very moment, Sri Mahaswami stood up, smart, luminous, immaterial. He came near the bars and sent an attentive and penetrating glance straight into these purified eyes which had been prepared to receive it. He grasped me immediately and made me one with him, but to another degree, even higher. It was not a feeling of happiness, nor even a sense of excellence, however elevated it might have been. It was some sort of a hole in the universe, external and internal, a blind sun in which one could still feel existence, warm and good. One could not see it, as there were no more eyes or a bearer of eyes. However, it was evident that the blind sun, deprived of destructive heat, existed. Moreover, just as certain as its existence was the infinity of Sri Mahaswami, these two certitudes were intertwined in such a way that they were impossible to separate. Their unity lasted what could be ordinarily called a certain time. When it had been decided, the consciousness of the old body reappeared and the little I that records and knows showed itself. The body did not have its ordinary breath anymore. The chest movements were unfamiliar to him, rare, superficial, and effortless. The body itself stood rigid, while the physical eyes were nailed to the point where Sri Mahaswami, the supreme Mayavin, had just wiped out by his eye the universe created by his eye. This body stood motionless until the moment Sri Mahaswami wished that his own image should withdraw from the surface of the eyes and of the body that stared at him. In its place arose the ordinary sensations which, put together by their own distinctive mode, form this material world. There lingered for a general sensation of a burnt brick. The whole world was dry, deprived of sense and color. People moved like phantoms or kind of shades, slightly more colored. Nothing had a true reality, neither men nor objects, only the vigraha of the temples. The life-endowed images of the gods seemed real to me when I thought of them, and this because they can stay connected to that reality underlying the appearances and wiping out more or less the burnt brick stage settings of the universe. I reached the temple of the Queen late in the evening. At the chapel of Adi Shankara, the gates of heavy iron bars were open. The great Acharya received me as an old and dear friend. He knew that I belonged to Sri Mahaswami. The great goddess was surrounded by heavy smoke. She still blessed me with her eyes made out of light. I understood that I should not overextend the darshan and quickly retired. My body is somewhat exhausted after the Kerala tour. Everything seems to happen at maximum speed. As soon as the nervous system had some respite, it is snatched for another teaching. The problem of sleep is not yet solved. There is not enough rest and the waking up is difficult. Would I have entered in a phase of total and final transformation? Let the will of Sri Mahaswami be done. Devotees, we shall continue to listen at the Shivasthana ashram in the coming episode, bowing at the holy feet of the Gurus. Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara.